Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, I don't know about you, but sometimes it seems to me like life is this string of coincidences, and if you look left or look right or blink, you'll miss them, and you won't go down this path you might have gone down. Won't discover the shiny thing because you never would have saw it. So here's what happened. I'm watching RPG a Day videos all last month. Actually, I'm kind of like listening to them on my phone mostly because I'm driving to work, so I'll just put the headphones in. It's the most convenient time, or maybe it's um, driving someplace else or like lunchtime at work. So I'm burning through the minutes on my phone plan. Even though our phone plan is pretty robust, I managed to, I think the last 2 or 3 days of our plan, it finally didn't work. And so I think my girlfriend was going to kill me. But, so I tried to be good. I got the warnings. But, so I watched less and less and wait till I got home and into the Wi-Fi. But, I didn't make it. Anyhow, so during that last period of time, I thought to myself, I should really get into podcasts or just start seeing if there's any good podcasts out there on gaming, because I've just, I'm not a Luddite, but I just never got into podcasts. And, the only other thing sometimes I'll do is I'll have Karen read me, an RPG PDF off the phone, because that was saving some money too. I won't listen to these videos until later. So I look around for some podcasts. I'm not really sure what to look for. So I figure, what am I going to put in as a search term to begin with before I start to get recommendations and have one podcast lead me to the next, just like kind of like YouTube or blogs or anything else. And so I put in as a search term, not surprisingly, Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Let me see what shows up there. Then I'll find some cool podcasts. And I swear, even though I'm just going to reference that game, this video is not about that game. It's more about a philosophy in general. But I guess that's what the video is about. But I discovered these podcasts. And I'm listening to one, and it's called The Game's the Thing. And I never heard of any of these podcasts before. And I'm listening to this interview with James Edward Raj. I think it's from like back in 2011, 2012. I'm like, wait a minute. I know that guy. I know this guy running the podcast. And it's Ron Blessing. Like, huh. I've been watching his videos. We're friends on Facebook. And so that was kind of entertaining. I guess he doesn't do the podcast anymore. And I'd only watched like half of his videos because I was running out of minutes, and I was inundated. I'm still catching up on RPG a Day videos. So anyhow, I started at the same time, or like right after I'm watching these podcasts, I get my minutes back, and I think I was actually doing some at home, and so I started listening to Ron's RPG a Day videos backwards, because I don't know where I left off. So I'm listening to day 31, day 30, 29. I can't tell you where this quote comes from, and they're great, by the way. I would recommend go watching them because he's really, really insightful. Definitely, one of the people kind of, went off on these tangents and use the questions as jumping off platforms. So he says something that I've got to write down as soon as I hear it. He says, games, when we're role-playing, we're emulating fiction. And that resonated with me instantly because that's what I'm doing. It doesn't mean that I'm trying to recreate the fiction I saw, but I'm emulating it. I've talked about this a gazillion times, at least 4. As a kid, what got me into role-playing once I realized it existed is because I didn't want the stories that I read to end. I always, would go outside and play that I was, or sometimes it would be inside, and I would imagine I was somebody like somebody I read in a book, or I saw on a movie or a TV show, and I was someplace like where they were, and I'd make up new stories. And it was very natural for me to go gravitate towards role-playing, because I was like, wow, I can do this, and for real, with other people, for real. More or less. I can do this with other people. And it won't just be this make-believe thing in my head. We'll have some rules. So it won't just be, I shot you, no you didn't. And we can create some new stories. It'll be great. I didn't think create new stories, but I just, you look at this thing, you're like, this will be awesome. I love this these genres. I didn't even know the word genre back then. Maybe I did. But I think I applied it to music. Anyhow, that's a big digression. So, instantly resonated with that. And at around the same time, I'm watching a couple other podcasts with interviews with James Raggi in them, and one was called Designers and Discourses. Really good one. I think that one's still current. And there was another one called Just One More Fix. And I was listening to about things like Fate and Burning Wheel and about various game concepts and even about some LARP stuff. I didn't realize they were going to be talking about some LARP stuff, but it was all really good. So I'm enjoying the podcast dive that I'm going into. But James said something, and I swear this is not a Lamentations of the Flame Princess video. He was talking about, approaching games as if like the situation were real. He talked about this, and I've already mentioned this at least once, where he put himself in this mindset as he was designing his game, as he was playing games, what would make these characters do what they're doing? Because generally in most role-playing games, I was thinking about this afterwards, most role-playing games, the situations that the player characters find themselves in, the basic scenario is horrible. You look at things like Eclipse Phase or Tech Noir or any kind of, give me any kind of cyberpunk, futuristic things. We don't play futuristic games where everything's happy. We generally play things where something's horrible is going on. I'm reading the game Aberrant, and it's horrific. Like, what would happen if a bunch of people all of a sudden became more or less superheroes? And exactly what you think. It would be chaos. And there'd all be all kinds of plot and subterfuge and nasty stuff going on, and some great things happening in the world, also some chaotic things happening in the world. And he's talking about James plays Lamentations of the Flame Princess is nominally set in late 16th century, early 17th century Europe. You don't have to play it that way because it's basic D&D rules. However, that's kind of his vibe, and if you look at the game, that's part of where it's going. And so he's asking the question: what would make these people leave normal society? They just simply can't fit in, and instead they're going to go to the places that everybody else knows you should not go to. And they're going there in search of thrills, in search of adventure, out of curiosity, perhaps for some gold, risking life and limb, going to places that most people will not make it back. And when they die, it won't be sanitized death like we tend to do in role-playing games, or like, it's very classic in Dungeons and Dragons. The guy, just falls, I'm dead. Watch the old movies too. No, it's going to be that thing, just like he has in his book. There's one, the famous picture where the main character, the woman with the red hair, the Flame Princess, if you will, she's had an encounter with what looks like a gray ooze, and like one of her legs is burned off, and parts of her fingers are burned off, and she's screaming in pain and terror, and it's like just post encounter, and he's talking about, well, that's really what would happen. It could be horrible. So just that whole idea, why are these people doing this? What's really going on? Making the world, have some kind of consistency. To me, I like that, and that's for me, that's part of emulating fiction, is not just having it be the statistical dance. And for me, I was thinking about it. It's not just about rules light systems, because I've talked a lot of times about liking rules light systems. But the more I thought about it, I'm thinking, like, well, what was I looking for as a kid when I got involved in the games? I heard about role-playing games. I opened the box. This is great. And I think, I had a lot of fun. But I think at some point, I got lost in the game. I think oftentimes we get lost in the game. And I forgot about what made it appealing in the first place. And, I didn't used to think about what my play style was. But I remember now, like, I had many, many games where I played it in a very, for lack of a better term, gamist manner. And, we had these combats, we had these characters with, I like combat, but we had these characters with these statistics, and you talk about how strong your guy was, or you had a +5 Holy Avenger, and you'd get involved in some kind of scuffle or whatever, and it could become this very mechanical thing. And sure, it was a hoot, and it was a blast, but it was a little bit more like, it was like playing dice, where that's thrilling. It's like, oh man, you won, you lost. But there was a part where we became detached, or I became more detached from the fiction. And it was a little bit more like playing a board game. Not all the time, but there was those moments I'd go back from the session and say, yeah, that was fun, but something was wrong. Like, it wasn't as exciting as I wanted it to be. I didn't quite get, what now I would imagine would be an immersive feeling. The game fiction. I wasn't emulating fiction during those times. And so, it wasn't necessarily the experience I wanted. It wasn't about that. For me, it wasn't where it became tactical and about numbers. I really enjoy rules. If you watch my channel, you're no stranger to that. I talk about them all the time. But, I remember not so long ago having this conversation with Anthony, with Runeslinger, and we're talking about, like, why do you like rules light systems? And, he came up with these three hypotheses, three ideas, like why you might like rules light systems. Choose one. And the first one was, I prefer light rules so that I can rule without rules lookups and be in charge of how things happen. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's not really me. I don't really necessarily want to be in charge of how things happen. So I don't, and I think that philosophy is kind of like, I want the rules to get out of the way so they won't interfere with, like, how I want things to go. The second would be, I prefer light rules so the rules don't shape the narrative. And I'm thinking, not really. That sounded a little bit familiar occasionally, but that wasn't really me either, because, we roll dice, we find out what happens. It does shape the narrative. And I'm thinking, well, that's I like that because I like to be unpredictable. And part of the appeal of the gaming thing to me wasn't that I was was that I wasn't just going to be in my backyard making up the story. Like something unpredictable was going to happen, just like it did in the stories, just like it did in the books and in the movies, where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. Part of that would be the players, but I wanted that kind of like that random element, fate, chance, the universe. And the last category he gave me was that I prefer light rules, as it is easier to interpret and apply the rules. And that, the light goes on. Yeah, that's me, because I believe the rules should be important. That they should be, I hate to use this term sacrosanct, but I want to follow the rules, whatever they are. Even if part of the rules is that you get to make up a rule on the fly if you're not really sure what's, what to do, as long as it's fair. As long as you say, okay, here's, roll 2d6, and okay, if you roll, we'll do the Dungeon World mechanic right here. We're not really sure, so we need a fuzzy middle. Whatever, as long as it's fair. That, to me, made more sense. And at that point, I don't want to, I want to be able to interpret and apply the rules, because I want to get back to emulating fiction. I want that world that makes, that's internally consistent. I mean, we can emulate just what dire circumstances that these people are in, and why you're really making these decisions. What's really, what's your actual motivation. And this does not mean dark at all. You can play this in a very lighthearted manner, but just having this the game world fiction makes sense. But when a rule comes up, or when a situation comes up where a rule needs to be applied, where the success or failure would be interesting or consequential, or it's time for the rule because that's what it says we're supposed to do here. We're in a conflict resolution phase. Then it's not something we have to stop for a minute and pull ourselves out of this emulating this fiction, because we just know what to do because it's pretty simple. And that kind of made sense to me. So yeah, I wonder what the topic of this video really is. But these were some things that were rattling around in my head. I'm sure I'll talk about them more. And a lot of them obviously are topics that I'm kind of revisiting, or that I've thought about before. But so I'm not really sure where I'm going with this. Maybe I'll write this thesis one day and be famous. I doubt it. I think it's all been done. Have a good one.